I remember the day clearly, though I wish I could forget it. I had just returned home from work, exhausted and hoping for a quiet evening, when my phone buzzed. At first I thought it was just another work message or maybe a text from a friend, but the moment I unlocked it, my heart froze. It was from him, my husband, and the words on the screen shattered everything I believed about our life together. "I'm filing for divorce. Check the bank. It's done." I stared at that text like it was written in a language I didn't understand. My mind raced. I read it again and again, hoping some miracle would erase it, hoping the words were a mistake. But there it was, plain and cruel. No warning, no conversation, no explanation. Just a cold, emotionless decision that emptied our shared life into silence. I sank to the floor, gripping my phone like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. How could he do this? How could the man I trusted, loved and shared years of my life with simply send a text and erase our marriage? My hands shook, my chest tightened, and tears blurred my vision. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly powerless. For hours I didn't move. I just sat there, replaying every moment, every argument, every quiet evening we had spent together. I tried to find the signs I must have missed. Was it me? Had I done something wrong, or was this betrayal just a part of who he really was, hidden behind the mask I thought I knew? The next day I confronted him, not in anger, not with shouting, but quietly, with a calm I didn't feel. I asked him why. His answer, vague, dismissive and cold. "It's better this way," he said, as if that explained everything. But it didn't. It only confirmed what I feared. He had made his choice, and my feelings didn't matter. I left that conversation feeling hollow. The life I had imagined, our shared dreams, our plans, even the small comforts of everyday marriage, were gone. And yet, amidst the shock, something inside me stirred. Not anger, not hatred, something sharper, something that whispered, "You are not powerless. You are not finished. You will not be forgotten." That night, I sat at my desk, a notebook open before me. I began to write, not letters to him, not confessions of sorrow, but a plan. I wasn't sure what it would look like yet. I only knew one thing. I would not let him erase me without consequences. I would uncover the truth, reveal the secrets he had hidden, and make sure everyone who mattered knew the man I had really married. Days turned into nights as I quietly gathered information. I reviewed our accounts, our interactions, and any traces of his behavior that didn't add up. Every casual lie, every hidden message, every suspicious meeting became a piece of a puzzle I was determined to solve. With every discovery, my resolve hardened. I realized that this wasn't just about divorce. It was about justice, about truth, and about reclaiming the life he had tried to destroy. Even as I plotted, I tried to maintain appearances. I smiled, I worked, I talked to friends, all while my mind raced with strategies and possibilities. Every text I sent, every phone call I made, every social interaction was carefully measured. I could feel him thinking he had the upper hand, that I was devastated and broken. But in reality, I was quietly turning the tables. And then one night, a revelation came to me. While going through his personal emails, something I knew I shouldn't have done but had to, I found a series of messages that changed everything. He wasn't just ending the marriage. He had hidden assets, secret dealings, and a side of his life that no one, not even me, had known existed. Everything he thought was invisible, everything he believed I would never uncover, was now within my reach. I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. Fear because exposing this could spiral out of control, but exhilaration because finally I had the power. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was someone who could take what had been stolen, not with violence or anger, but with truth, strategy, and patience. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be confrontation, lies, and probably more betrayals I hadn't seen coming. But I also knew that when the time came, he wouldn't see me coming. He had underestimated me from the start. He assumed I was broken. He assumed I would fade quietly. But I was anything but quiet. I was patient. I was calculating. And I was ready. That night, as I closed my notebook and turned off the light, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply made a silent vow. He would not get away with this. Not silently, not without consequences. And when the moment arrived, I would be ready to expose every secret, every betrayal, every lie. Because some betrayals demand more than sadness. They demand action. And I had just found mine. The days after the divorce text were a blur of disbelief and careful observation. I went about my routines, pretending everything was normal while my mind was constantly analysing, questioning and planning. I knew I couldn't rush this, not yet. He had underestimated me, assuming I would crumble, assuming I would disappear into silence. But the truth was I was more alert, more determined, and more focused than I had ever been in my life. It started with small details, bank statements, email notifications, messages I had previously ignored, all became clues to a side of him I had never truly seen. At first it was hard to believe. Could the man I loved, the man I trusted, really have hidden such significant parts of his life from me? I stared at the screen for hours, my hands trembling, my heart beating faster with every line I read. Every email and transaction hinted at secret meetings, hidden accounts, and people who had been involved in things I never would have imagined. The more I discovered, the more I realized that he had carefully constructed a double life. While I thought our marriage was built on shared dreams and honesty, he had been quietly weaving a network of secrets and lies. Every weekend getaway I thought was innocent. Every late-night work call, every small argument I had dismissed. All of it suddenly felt like pieces of a puzzle I was only beginning to see. It was overwhelming. The betrayal I had felt from the divorce text was only the tip of the iceberg. What followed was a sinking feeling that someone I loved had not only betrayed me, but had done so with methodical intent. I couldn't help but feel both enraged and impressed by the extent of his deception. But anger alone wouldn't help me. I needed a plan, a strategy to take back control, to expose him, to make the truth undeniable. I began documenting everything meticulously, each suspicious transaction, each unexplained email, every interaction that seemed odd, was logged with timestamps and notes. I even started creating a visual map connecting the people, places, and events that formed the web he had spun. With every discovery, I felt more empowered. I realized that knowledge was my greatest weapon. He may have thought he was in control, but now I was holding the strings, even if he didn't know it yet. One night, as I dug deeper into his digital life, I found something that made my stomach drop. Hidden files, encrypted and password protected, on a cloud account I had never accessed before. My curiosity was unbearable. I worked through the night, piecing together passwords and bypassing security questions that he assumed I would never figure out. And when I finally accessed the files, my heart skipped a beat. Inside were contracts, hidden bank accounts, and even email chains that revealed alliances with people I had never known. It was clear now the divorce text wasn't just an impulsive act. It was part of a larger plan, a manipulation I had been oblivious to until now. He had planned to cut me out completely, not just emotionally, but financially and socially. Every move he had made, every choice he thought was hidden, was now mine to see, and more importantly, mine to reveal if I chose. But I couldn't act recklessly. I had to be strategic. I spent the next few days watching, analysing, and confirming every detail I had found. I needed to be sure. One mistake could ruin everything. I could feel his presence even from a distance. The man who had sent me that cold, life-changing text had underestimated the quiet strength of the person he thought he had broken. In the quiet of my apartment, I began planning. My revenge would not be explosive or public in a way that could backfire. It would be precise, methodical, and undeniable. I would expose him in a way that left no room for denial. But first, I had to gather proof, strengthen my case, and ensure that the truth was complete. Every hidden account, every secret message, every lie would become a piece of the revelation I would one day unleash. I also realized something crucial. This wasn't just about me anymore. His deception had touched not only our marriage but also my family and friends, people who had unknowingly trusted him. I owed it to them as well to make the truth known, and so the plan began to take shape. Not as a simple act of revenge, but as a calculated mission to restore justice, to reclaim what had been taken, and to shine light on the darkness he had hidden in. Each day I grew more confident. I had never imagined myself in this role, but I was discovering strengths I didn't know I had. Patience, intelligence, and careful observation became my allies. I learned to read between the lines, notice the smallest inconsistencies, and interpret hidden meanings in every action he took. Slowly, I felt the fear and powerlessness that had consumed me after that first text transform into something far more potent: control. And then the breakthrough came. While reviewing his phone records, I noticed repeated calls to a number I didn't recognize. At first, I hesitated, unsure whether to investigate further, but something told me this was significant. I traced the number, cross-referenced it with his emails, and discovered a person he had been collaborating with secretly. The extent of the betrayal now became fully clear. He had been planning the divorce not just to remove me from his life, but to protect himself, hide his assets, and maintain a secret network that he believed would be untouchable. I felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and exhilaration. Every plan he had, every expectation he had of me was about to be disrupted, and the realization that I held the key to exposing all of it sent a rush of power through me. I wasn't just a victim, I was an architect of the reckoning that was about to unfold. The next phase of my plan involved careful timing. I couldn't act impulsively. I had to be patient, to wait until every detail was confirmed, every piece of evidence was undeniable. I made lists, organized documents, and created backups. Every conversation, every email, every suspicious transaction became part of a record I could present if necessary. The clarity of purpose gave me focus, something I hadn't felt in months. And yet, amidst the strategy and planning, I couldn't ignore the emotional toll. There were nights when I cried silently, wondering how someone I trusted so deeply could betray me so completely. There were moments when doubt crept in, when I questioned whether exposing him was truly worth the cost. But every time, the memory of that single text, the moment my life was changed, reminded me why I couldn't give up. By the end of the week, I felt ready. I had pieced together the puzzle, mapped out the web of lies, and confirmed every detail. The man who had thought he could erase me, manipulate me, and remain untouchable was about to be confronted not with anger, but with undeniable truth. I was prepared to expose his secrets, reclaim my power, and show everyone what betrayal truly looked like, and that it could be confronted with intelligence, patience, and courage. That night, I sat in my apartment, a notebook full of evidence beside me, and made one final vow. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, clarity, and reclaiming my life. And when the time came, he would understand that the woman he tried to break was stronger, smarter, and far more prepared than he had ever imagined. I knew that knowledge alone wasn't enough. Discovering his secrets, uncovering the hidden accounts, tracing his emails. It was all necessary, but it was only the first step. The real challenge was how to use that information. I had to be precise, careful, and patient. One wrong move could alert him, and everything I had uncovered could vanish before it ever saw the light of day. This had to be calculated. For days I observed him discreetly, noting his routines, the people he interacted with, and the patterns of his communications. He still believed I was devastated, that the divorce had shattered me completely. He didn't realize that behind my quiet exterior, I was planning, calculating, and preparing my next moves. Every call he made, every meeting he attended, I tracked mentally and sometimes physically, ensuring that every piece of the puzzle aligned with what I already knew. I began creating a digital timeline of his activities. Every transaction, every secret meeting, every hidden account was mapped. I made notes of suspicious phone numbers, email addresses, and unusual locations. It was painstaking work, but it gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. I realized something profound. The man who had tried to erase me from his life had underestimated the quiet power of observation and patience. Meanwhile, I had to maintain appearances. Friends and family believed I was struggling, heartbroken, and lost. I let them think that. I even let him believe it. I needed him to remain unaware of the storm gathering quietly behind my calm exterior. Each interaction was carefully controlled, each reaction measured. While he assumed I was weak, I was growing stronger with every passing day. Then came the breakthrough, a pattern I hadn't noticed before. One of his secret contacts frequently met him in locations I could track, always at times when I knew he thought I was asleep or out of town. It was subtle, but once I recognized it, everything began to fall into place. These meetings weren't random. They were part of a carefully orchestrated network designed to protect his hidden assets and keep his lies intact. And now, finally, I had the key to exposing it. I began crafting a plan to reveal the truth in a way that he couldn't deny. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted clarity, undeniable proof, and a public reckoning that would leave him with no room to maneuver. I organized all my evidence into digital files, complete with screenshots, emails, and detailed notes. Every lie he had told, every betrayal he had enacted, every hidden financial move, it was all documented, ready to be revealed. Part of the strategy involved timing. I couldn't act too soon, or he would have time to cover his tracks. I couldn't act too late, or the opportunity to make the revelation impactful would pass. I needed a moment when exposure would hit hardest, when everyone involved could see the truth and he would have nowhere to hide. As I planned, I also considered the emotional impact. This wasn't about cruelty, it was about justice. I didn't want to humiliate him. I wanted the truth to shine, to illuminate his deceit for anyone who had been affected. I wanted people to see the man he truly was, not the carefully curated image he had presented to the world. That clarity would be far more powerful than anger or shame. To strengthen my position, I discreetly reached out to people he had involved in his secret dealings. Without revealing myself, I asked questions and collected indirect evidence, confirming patterns and motives. It was like assembling a jigsaw puzzle from a distance. Every piece had to fit perfectly before I could reveal the full picture. At home, I rehearsed scenarios in my head. How would he react if the evidence was suddenly exposed? How would his associates respond? What would happen when friends and family learned the truth? I imagined his shock, the moment of disbelief, the subtle panic that would finally break through his carefully maintained composure. And for the first time since the divorce text, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Not out of cruelty, but out of justice finally being possible. Meanwhile, I strengthened my personal resilience. I couldn't afford to falter emotionally during this process. I maintained my routines, exercised discipline, and kept a clear mind. Each day I reminded myself that the goal wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was to reclaim control over my life and ensure the truth was known. This perspective kept me grounded, focused, and unshakable, even as I delved deeper into the tangled web of his secrets. Then, one evening, I discovered a critical piece of information that could change everything. He had hidden evidence of financial manipulation, assets that were not in his name but in the names of shell entities. It was cleverly concealed, and only someone with persistence and patience could uncover it. I realized that revealing this alone could be enough to expose the full extent of his deceit. My pulse quickened. This was it, the keystone that could make the revelation unstoppable. I started preparing the digital files for release, organizing them so that each piece of evidence was clear, chronological, and irrefutable. Screenshots, bank records, email chains, all laid out with precision. The more I worked, the more confident I felt. I was ready to act, but I reminded myself of patience. Timing was everything. The moment had to be perfect, and I would not rush it. To ensure the impact was complete, I also planned subtle hints to those around him, friends, colleagues, and associates. Without revealing my hand, I dropped small breadcrumbs, enough to create curiosity and doubt. I wanted him to feel the weight of uncertainty, the subtle pressure of knowing that something was amiss, without realizing the full storm was coming. It was psychological strategy, a chess game I had learned to play with precision. The final step before execution involved confirming his movements and communications. I tracked patterns, verified timelines, and cross-checked all evidence to ensure there were no errors. Every piece had to be accurate. One small mistake could discredit the entire plan. I took careful notes, triple-checked documents, and rehearsed how the exposure would unfold. Everything had to be flawless. By the end of the week, I was ready. I had created a comprehensive record of his deceit, hidden dealings, and betrayals. I had confirmed the network of secrets he thought was untouchable. I had prepared the timing and method of exposure. And most importantly, I had strengthened my own resolve. I was no longer the shocked, heartbroken wife who received a devastating text. I was a strategist, a planner, and a woman ready to reclaim the truth. Sitting in my apartment that night, reviewing the final files one last time, I felt a quiet sense of power. Not arrogance, not vengeance, but clarity. I was about to take action that would reveal everything he had tried to hide. And when the moment came, I knew he would understand the cost of underestimating the woman he thought he had broken. This was not the act of a vengeful heart. It was the careful unfolding of justice. And I would make sure that every lie, every betrayal, and every secret he had kept hidden would finally see the light of day. The day finally arrived. I had rehearsed every detail, double-checked every piece of evidence, and confirmed every timeline. My heart raced, but not with fear. This was anticipation. The man who had thought he could erase me, manipulate me, and keep his secrets hidden was about to face the truth in a way he could neither control nor escape. I set everything up meticulously. The files, the screenshots, the documentation, every piece of proof was organized to tell a clear, undeniable story. I had made copies, backups, and even a summarized timeline that laid out each betrayal, every financial manipulation, and every secret interaction. It wasn't enough to reveal his actions. It had to be foolproof, irrefutable, and visible to those who mattered most. I contacted a few key people, family members, close friends, and colleagues, without revealing the full plan. I hinted that something critical was about to surface, something that would change how they saw him. The anticipation I felt wasn't just personal, it was shared silently with the people whose trust he had exploited. I wanted the revelation to land with full impact, leaving no room for denial or evasion. When he arrived at a casual meeting we had set up under the pretense of resolving minor issues, I noticed the confidence in his posture. He still believed he held the upper hand, that I was heartbroken, broken, and incapable of confronting him effectively. How wrong he was. I welcomed him with calm eyes and a steady voice, betraying none of the excitement swirling in my mind. "I think it's time we discuss the details," I said softly, gesturing toward a folder I had placed discreetly on the table. His eyes flicked to it, curiosity piqued, but still with a sense of arrogance. He assumed it was some petty grievance or complaint. He had no idea what he was about to see. I began slowly, outlining the evidence without accusation, presenting facts in a way that could not be denied. Screenshots, emails, financial records, and records of secret communications, all laid bare. With every page I turned, I watched as his composure wavered, the faintest tension crossing his features. The man who had seemed untouchable, the orchestrator of my heartbreak, was now confronted with the undeniable truth of his actions. His first reaction was disbelief. He chuckled nervously, attempting to dismiss the evidence as if humor could mask his guilt. But as I methodically walked through each revelation, the laughter faded. His attempts to explain, to rationalize, or to spin a story fell flat. Each lie he had constructed, every manipulation he thought was hidden, was now fully exposed, documented, and impossible to deny. I could see the subtle panic beginning to creep in. His confident posture faltered, his voice wavered, and for the first time in months, he was unsure. He realized that the woman he had underestimated, the woman he had tried to destroy, was not only intact, but also fully prepared to reveal everything. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Then came the most satisfying moment. When I presented the records of hidden financial transactions, secret accounts, and the network of collaborators he had relied on, I watched him pale. This was the proof he had assumed would remain buried, the proof that tied every deception together. The realization hit him fully. The life he had tried to construct in shadows was now illuminated, and he had nowhere to hide. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't yell or scream. There was no dramatic outburst, just the quiet, undeniable presentation of truth. Sometimes, I realized, the most devastating form of exposure is subtle, calm, and irrefutable. The room felt heavy, charged with tension, and I could sense his mind racing, searching for escape routes, for excuses, for ways to regain control, but there were none. As he sat in silence, I glanced around at the people I had involved. Their expressions ranged from shock to disbelief, some nodding in quiet acknowledgement as the story unfolded. The impact of the revelation was immediate. No explanations, no defenses could reverse what they had just witnessed. He had been exposed in a way that was fair, factual, and complete. After the presentation, I allowed him a moment of reflection. I wanted him to understand fully, not just intellectually, but emotionally, the consequences of his choices. His gaze met mine, and for a fleeting second, I saw the regret that had been absent in every interaction since the divorce text. felt a small measure of vindication, not from cruelty, but from justice realized. The aftermath was both immediate and transformative. Friends and family reached out, confirming suspicions, sharing stories, and acknowledging the manipulation he had employed. The man who had thought he could erase me quietly was now faced with public accountability. His network of secrets began to unravel simply because I had the courage, patience, and clarity to expose it. And yet, even in this moment of triumph, I reminded myself of the emotional journey I had endured. The heartbreak, the disbelief, the nights spent questioning everything, these were not wasted. They had shaped me, strengthened me, and prepared me to act decisively. What could have broken me instead became the foundation of my strength. In the days that followed, he retreated into silence. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting matches. The exposure had done its work quietly, powerfully, and irrevocably. The man who had believed he was untouchable was now confronted with the undeniable truth, and the weight of his actions was fully evident. I, on the other hand, emerged with a renewed sense of self. I had faced betrayal, uncovered deception, and orchestrated a plan that was both ethical and impactful. I hadn't acted out of anger, but out of clarity, patience, and a determination to reclaim control. The journey had transformed me. I was no longer simply a wife betrayed. I was a woman who understood her own strength, the power of truth, and the importance of patience in facing adversity. That night, alone in my apartment, I reflected on everything that had happened. The process of discovery, planning, and execution had been exhausting, emotional, and deeply personal. But the result was undeniable. The truth had been revealed, justice had been quietly served, and I had reclaimed not just my life, but my dignity. And as I looked back on the entire journey, I realized something profound. Betrayal can break hearts, but it can also reveal inner strength we never knew we had. Exposure, when done with clarity and integrity, can illuminate the darkest truths. And sometimes the greatest victories are not loud, dramatic, or vengeful. They are quiet, strategic, and transformative. Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming control, restoring truth, and stepping forward into a life unburdened by the shadows of deceit. And I knew with a quiet certainty that the lessons I had learned through betrayal and exposure would guide me for the rest of my life. The days after the exposure were quieter than I expected. It wasn't the chaos I had imagined. No dramatic confrontations, no loud arguments, just a calm settling into the aftermath of truth. People had seen the full picture, acknowledged the deception, and the man who had thought he could erase me now faced the reality he had created. But for me, the journey was far from over. I spent hours reflecting on the path that had brought me here. From that first devastating text to uncovering hidden accounts, secret meetings, and carefully orchestrated lies, I had experienced the full spectrum of betrayal. And yet, what I realized most clearly was this: the power he had once held over me existed only because I had allowed him to define my reality. Once I reclaimed that perspective, once I armed myself with knowledge and patience, his control vanished. The process of exposing him had been transformative. It wasn't just about uncovering secrets or presenting evidence. It was about reclaiming my sense of self. I had learned to trust my instincts, observe carefully, and plan meticulously. Each night spent strategizing, every moment of quiet patience, had built a resilience I didn't know I possessed. The woman who had once been paralyzed by shock and betrayal had grown into someone capable, confident, and unwavering. I also realized that revenge isn't about cruelty. It's not about humiliation or anger. True empowerment comes from understanding, preparation, and precision. My actions were guided by clarity, not vengeance. I didn't want to break him for the sake of breaking him. I wanted to illuminate the truth, reclaim control, and restore balance to the situation. And in doing so, I found a strength I never knew existed within me. Family and friends reached out after the exposure, many expressing regret that they hadn't seen the warning signs earlier. But rather than feeling bitter, I felt grateful. Grateful that I had been able to uncover the truth, not just for myself, but for those around me. Grateful that this betrayal, painful as it was, had ultimately revealed resilience, clarity, and courage that might have remained dormant if the events had unfolded differently. I began to rebuild my life with intention. I focused on personal growth, career advancement, and strengthening relationships that mattered. I distanced myself from anyone who had contributed to the web of lies, and I nurtured those who had supported me through the journey. Slowly, I discovered that the weight of betrayal didn't have to define my future. It could refine it, guide it, and even empower it. There were moments of lingering doubt, of course. The memories of deception didn't vanish overnight. At times, I questioned whether the path I had taken was worth the emotional toll. But each time I revisited the evidence, each time I reflected on the patience, strategy, and integrity I had maintained, I reaffirmed my decision. I had not acted impulsively, nor had I allowed anger to dictate my actions. I had acted with purpose, intelligence, and self-respect. And perhaps most importantly, I learned the value of foresight and vigilance. Betrayal rarely happens without warning signs. Subtle inconsistencies, hidden behaviors, and the feeling that something is off. These are clues we must pay attention to. Trust is vital, yes, but discernment is essential. The journey I had taken reinforced this truth more vividly than any advice ever could. The man who had once tried to control my life with deceit now existed in my past. I no longer felt fear, anger, or resentment toward him in the same way. Those emotions had transformed into calm clarity, a quiet confidence that I could face any challenge, uncover any truth, and protect myself from betrayal in the future. The sense of empowerment I felt was not fleeting, it was permanent, a foundation on which I could build the next chapter of my life. Looking back, I also recognized the unexpected gifts within the ordeal. Betrayal had forced me to develop skills I might never have discovered otherwise: resilience under pressure, strategic thinking, and the ability to navigate complex emotional landscapes. I had learned to observe without bias, act with precision, and trust my instincts even when circumstances were unclear. These lessons, painful as they were, became invaluable tools for the future, and so I moved forward with intention. I cultivated relationships based on honesty and transparency, and I committed to living a life guided by clarity and self-respect. I refused to allow past betrayals to dictate my worth or my decisions. Instead, I carried the lessons forward, using them to shape choices that honored my values, reinforced my boundaries, and safeguarded my emotional well-being. The moral of this story is simple, yet profound. Betrayal can break hearts, but it can also awaken strengths we never knew existed. Exposure of deception is not about revenge, it's about clarity, justice, and reclaiming control. And while heartbreak may be unavoidable in life, how we respond defines our resilience, intelligence, and character. The path to empowerment often comes through adversity, but those who navigate it with patience, strategy, and integrity emerge stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. As I reflect on the journey, I realize that life is not just about the betrayals we endure, but about the lessons we extract from them. The experiences that challenge us can shape us, teach us and prepare us for a future where we stand taller, act smarter, and live with confidence. And when truth is revealed, when justice quietly prevails, we discover that our power was always within us. It only needed the trials to awaken it. I close this chapter of my life not with bitterness, but with clarity. The pain of betrayal, the shock of deceit, and the quiet satisfaction of exposing the truth have all become part of my story. A story that has forged strength from weakness, clarity from confusion, and empowerment from heartbreak. I step forward with certainty, knowing that no secret, no deception, and no betrayal can ever define me again. In the end, I learned that our response to betrayal determines our path. We can be shattered or we can rise. We can be silenced or we can speak the truth with courage. And when we act with intelligence, integrity, and patience, we reclaim not just what was taken, but also our sense of self, our dignity, and our future. Because life is not about the betrayals we face. It's about the strength, clarity, and courage we discover within ourselves when we face them head on. And that strength, once awakened, becomes the most powerful force of all.